So we're here to talk about how to, what's the exact title? How to muster up energy when you are exhausted. Right. They give more of these practical titles. Fine. So I'm not a physical therapist nor a gym instructor. So I'm not going to be speaking from that perspective. There are tricks of the trade. I'll begin with a story. When I was a teenager, I suffered from allergies. Mainly the ragweed, what they call hay fever allergy. Anybody suffers from that? You don't even know what it is? Do?
Most people in California
Do?
do.
But nobody's raised their hand. Okay. So anyway, it's not dangerous, but it is plenty annoying. The summer months, mid-August through September, as ragweed begins to reach its peak and begins to pollinate. So a perfectly beautiful summer day, breezy day for an allergy sufferer is horrible. Your whole plumbing gets stuffed up, and you get the tickle in the throat, and the itchy eyes, and the nose is running. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, good, fine. He keeps opening. Why are we opening the door? Why are you opening the door?
People should come in and not bother you. It bothers more the noise.
Yeah, they can come in, it's all right, yeah. It may be a recurrent theme this weekend. A story with door openings and door closings. Yeah. Some people like to open doors. Anyway, so I was in Detroit. I was one summer, I had a particular very heavy attack. It was almost an asthmatic attack. I couldn't breathe, so they had to give me something to open up my throat. And I went finally to an allergist. His name was Dr. Redner, and he did the first thing they do is they test you by these scratch tests on your arm, on your bicep, and they. So he gave me a few things, like one was ragweed, one was dust. Those two really blew up. They blew up, and I had an attack right there. So and I really was almost hard to breathe. So he gave me these 2 shots, and everything cleared up. I was like, a miracle. The shots were adrenaline. So I said to him, so what are you doing all these tests? Just give me this adrenaline. I'll shoot myself up every time I have an allergy thing, and that's that. So of course, he told me you'll build up immunity to it, and it can get dangerous. You'll need more and more. Okay, that didn't work. But then what intrigued me was the word adrenaline. So I said to him, is that the adrenaline that we talk about? The natural adrenaline that a person builds up when they get excited? So he said, yeah. So then I asked him something. I, for many years, worked, some of you may be aware of this, some may not, I'll probably speak about it in some other talks. For many years I worked, my job was a very unique job, that when the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke on Shabbos and holidays, and no tape recorders were used, and no notes were taken, we had to memorize hours and hours of these talks, almost word for word, and then reconstruct it after Shabbat, after Shabbos. So the work on Sunday was extremely intense, and on Sundays, I never felt having allergic reactions. I never felt the symptoms. So I asked the doctor, is it possible that because my natural adrenaline was running, so first I thought, I was so busy I didn't notice. You're so busy you don't even notice your nose is running. Or is it possible that my adrenaline was generating a type of control that was not allowing those symptoms to take effect? So he said, absolutely. And he told me this, something you probably never thought of. He said, you ever notice Broadway actors or opera singers or any type of theater, live performances for hours, they won't yawn and they'll never sneeze? How's that possible, he says? Sneeze, he says, is a natural thing. You can't control a sneeze. He says because when your adrenaline is flowing, you have superhuman control over your faculties. And he said that that's why you find that sometimes you set your mind, you want to wake up 6 a.m., it's better than any alarm clock. You'll wake up on the dot. And nobody understands why. You wake up on the dot. How does your body know? Because there is more power. We think that we have more power over ourselves than we think we do. So I developed then a theory about this adrenaline thing. That if people have natural adrenaline, we're not talking about a drug administered or an injection, but something that's causing you to be excited to the point of euphoria even, it'll actually control things that you can't control on your own. Even allergy symptoms, imagine. And I couldn't fabricate it because on Sunday the pressure was real. On Monday it wasn't as intense, so it didn't work on Monday. So you really need something that's on that level. And if you think about it, look at this. You ever stay up all night with a project you're really excited about? Mm-hmm. And you don't even realize the time is running. Suddenly you realize it's morning, you haven't eaten and you haven't slept. Suddenly you realize you're hungry. You ever realize, I'm starving. Why didn't you realize it 10 minutes before? Because you're so consumed with the experience, you're not thinking about yourself. And I spoke earlier about self. And I wanted to talk about that in context of mustering up energy when you're exhausted. Now, let me make something very clear. The human body needs sleep. The human body needs rest. It needs relaxation. There's no question about it. And you even see it in human nature. We were created that way. That the body, at a certain point, needs to get sleep. And without getting sleep, it can be destructive. It can be even dangerous. So that's not what we're discussing here. We're not talking about forcing yourself to the point of exhaustion and still having energy. Like we all know there are times you just got to do something. You'll stay up later and you'll just get through it till you get a second wind. But I wanted to talk about being able to that exhausted state that many people say, not right now I'm exhausted. Just in generally I'm exhausted. Life is exhausting. Just right now, before I met somebody I know, half hour ago, how are you doing? I'm exhausted. I said, you just came here. It's not even Friday night yet. So she said, no, I'm exhausted now for the last 3 years. Since I met you last. So I said, good. So maybe it's a state of being, it can be in a perpetual state of being. And it's true, because life can be exhausting. It drains you. And we spoke earlier about pressures. We all have our pressures. And there's a point that, that we give in. It's hard to have the same exuberance when you're 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old. Knowing that age here, I think I'm the oldest in the room. That's a compliment because I have good vision, right? And but the fact of the matter is that we're not 17 years old. There are 17s in this room, probably too. Yeah, there you go. How old are you?
21.
Oh, you're already an old man. Okay. I meet teenagers who tell me they're going through a midlife crisis. So it's true. Anyway, so getting back to this, so there's an exhaustion that life just wears on us, and I'll talk about that. I also want to talk, obviously, in a more technical sense, because that's what the title includes. But I just thought this adrenaline idea is a tremendous idea because I find that there's exhaustion objectively, that we all get tired at some point, but there's an exhaustion because we don't have things that really generate adrenaline in our lives, and if they do, they're very short term. They're like quick sugar pills. Like you take a sugar pill and you get, or caffeine, a shot of caffeine in the morning. I don't drink coffee, by the way. I never drank coffee. I'm a weirdo in my family because everybody drinks coffee. And I'm a weirdo actually wherever I go. They say, what's the matter with you? I know, I just never gravitate. It's not like I can't drink a coffee, but I just don't have that. I like a good cold, almost freezing Pellegrino or sparkling water. That's me. But the point of the matter, but I see the people, including my own family members, caffeine, they need that shot. And I understand why. And for other people, maybe tobacco, maybe people other things. And I'm not here advocating purism and getting rid of becoming caffeine free, etc., etc. It's not my point. I'm just saying that every one of us needs these jolts. But the question is, how much potential do we have to be able to jolt ourselves with some adrenaline inducing experience, not with again injection from within, like the opera singer or the musician or the description I gave about myself on the Sundays. And I think focusing on that rather than just saying, okay, how can I get more rest and how can I just have more relaxation, I think could be a tremendous way of giving a boost both to our general, our so-called general collective exhausted state and even immediate moments. And I'll use myself as a guinea pig here, as I've been doing, kosher guinea pig, because I deal with this all the time. So in the years when I worked, those years when I used to work on the remembering and recreating, sleep is anathema to memory, because as soon as you go to sleep, sleep kills memory. And it was very important to get things done before I went to sleep. And I remember actually training myself to stay up nights. Till this day, I never needed a lot of sleep, period, but I think it's adrenaline based. It's not just metabolism, because there's a certain, I guess when you have your engines revved up all the time, and it's not always comfortable, but it's always like this, it generates that even when you sleep, you're not really fully, you don't get a full night's sleep. By the way, I'm not advocating this for anybody. I'm just sharing with you my own experience. But I think all of us, when we have something exciting in our lives, you'll see it's the greatest antidote to exhaustion, because it's something you must do. It's like a compelling sense of urgency. That's the thing. So I would challenge you to ask yourself this question. If you were to list, let's start with a short list of 3 things that you consider to be a sense of urgency you really need to get done. And let me just qualify. This does not mean getting the food bought for your home this week, or preparing for Shabbos, or why I don't include that, because that's urgency again in the survival mode. That's like urgency as in we must do it. I'm talking about a sense of urgency that goes beyond, something that is not a necessity, something that you want and you believe in, a cause, activity, a hobby, that you really will go the extra mile. And I assure you that if you commit to that, you're going to find yourself having more adrenaline and less exhaustion. Now, it's important to talk about, because the United States, I remember my Russian cousins, remember I'm 100% Russian. I'm born in America, but my parents are both Russian. So we have a lot of things in common for those of you that. But I remember when my Russian cousins started coming out in 1971, 72, was the first exodus from under Brezhnev. Any of you came out at that time? No, it came later. So I remember they came the first time to the United States. So the first thing, two things that struck me very funny. They turned on the television. They loved to watch ads, and they didn't look at the shows. And they kept saying to me, "What is the thing going on between the ads?" They thought the ads was the main presentation, and the show was just like to fill up the. And by the way, afterwards I realized that they're probably actually right. That's probably it's exactly how they're produced, because no one's going to go turn on a show to watch ads. So they keep your attention long enough till you get to the next ad, But they were fascinated by the ads. I remember that. And the ads were also in English. It wasn't because, I don't know why, but it's just an interesting observation. They also kept saying, only in America, everybody wears eyeglasses. We have healthy eyes. I remember they kept saying, everyone's wearing eyeglasses. And I used to always smile and I say, but your teeth are all gold or silver. We all have white teeth. It's okay. So you got the eyes, we got the teeth. That was my. We used to speak in Yiddish because they spoke Yiddish. I didn't know. And finally, the third thing was they said to me. I remember them saying, "So what Americans do Sunday?" So I said, "They're sports." So they say, "What? They all go play sports?" I say, "No, they watch sports." Because it was a different culture, a different world. Remember, back in the 60s, 70s, I don't know what Russian television was about. I do remember, however, my father went to Russia. He spoke fluent Russian. He came back with an English newspaper. This is in 1971, 71. And they printed in Moscow. It was an English newspaper for English speakers, I guess. It was like a tabloid. And the cover story was a picture of a burned out town. Like you see one light bulb, but almost burned out. Like, a ghost town. And the top headline of the front page. The last residents from New York have moved out. Complete BS. Complete propaganda. That's what it said. The last residents from New York move out because of the crime and the wild animals. And basically, now, you live there, you didn't have there was no, besides Radio Free Europe, there was no other information. So it's just a different world. And then I realized, of course, then I remember hearing that the Yiddish newspaper in Russia, the communist Russia, was Emes. Which newspaper would you buy a newspaper that said truth? Here's the truth. Yeah. Or Pravda also means truth. How can you call a newspaper truth? It's like someone said, let me tell you the truth. Or right away. Why do you need to tell me the truth? But going back to this thing, so it's exactly right. Americans, what do they say? They say that you go to a baseball stadium, you have 60,000 people who need to lose weight are watching 18 people who don't need to. That's what they say. So we live vicariously through what we watch. And you see, Americans aren't into sports. Now, I'm not saying nobody plays sports, but people really think that if they watch sports, they are they're playing. That's called fake adrenaline. Why is it fake? Because you actually get excited by other people. I understand the people playing in the game, so of course they've got that whole energy going and so on. But I remember you watched like the last set in the last game in a 5-set the tennis championship. You're so nervous, and the guy serving seems to be extremely calm, and he should be the one. Like you can't even. Can you imagine trying to serve? But there's the thing called real adrenaline, and that's what we need to distinguish. If you're going to define a list of things you're going to do, that you find a sense of urgency in a cause, a belief, a value, even a hobby. It doesn't matter what it is. That, to me, is a key thing that I think can be really given to people and focus on. I'll talk about that moment for younger people especially, and it can preempt, in my opinion, so many problems. It can preempt depression, it can preempt boredom, it can preempt getting into trouble because you're looking for some high, and so many other things. And of course, it gets rid of exhaustion pretty quickly because it has that power. Again, I'm not talking the natural need for a body to rest and so on. So that's what I think you should all try to do that, try to identify a few things. And I'm going to talk about it a bit more in a moment. Going back to the sports thing, so that's what happens. We live vicariously. I know people who literally cannot miss one episode of a soap opera that plays, let's say, 2 p.m. on the daily TV. Now, today you don't have to watch it, you can just record it, right? And you say to yourself, the whole thing is a fake story. And you almost see how people, instead of living their own lives, they're living through the loves and the losses and the betrayals of other people. And they cry over it, and they obsess over it. And it's like, not me. I'm living through some other people. How can that be healthy? How can that create how's that not going to lead to a person to ultimately somewhere crash? Because how many, you can keep watching shows the rest of your life, but at some point there is a reality. Do you have your own relationship with somebody? And if you're more excited about what's happening in the soap opera than your own relationship, what does that tell you? And I mean, it sounds like a joke, but we all know it's not a joke. And I'm not, as I said earlier, I'm not here to, this is not social critique. It's just good to observation to see what's going on out there. And I'm not even suggesting anyone here at this table is trapped there, but we all have elements of it. Some people call it voyeurism. We like voyeurism. Voyeurism means you're watching others. You're voyeuristic. And the television age, which today includes the internet age, and the video age, the YouTube age, the Netflix age, whatever you want to call it, is very much the stimulation of the visual stimulation, as we know, is much more powerful than all the other sensory stimulations because it has that capacity to hypnotize us. It really holds us in a hypnosis. And I'm be the first to acknowledge my own guilt in this. I grew up in a home, there was a television. Some homes that my friends didn't have, but my father was a journalist, so it was a television. We didn't watch a lot, but it still watched enough that it became part of my... Now I don't have time, so I don't really, but there's still a thing, you see something, it just There's no way. There's no question about it. Right now, if somebody walked in, a celebrity here that everybody recognizes, everybody would turn. But I knew Jews and people who would never turn their head to somebody's celebrity because they didn't even know who the celebrity was, or even if they did, they didn't care.
They're lucky.
Right, because we are somewhat addicts to a steady menu of offerings that everybody's inundating us with, and don't think we're immune to it. When I was younger, I used to think, who cares about who would spend billions of dollars in advertising? I'm not affected by it. We're so affected, we don't even know how affected we are. You think they're spending money because it affects. It affects. I was once in Lima, Peru, at a conference. It was on happiness. And there were two speakers. I was speaking from the Jewish, more mystical, spiritual point of view. And I forgot the name of a professor. He was presenting in a more psychological, secular point of view. And remember, two things he said were very interesting. The first thing he said was, he said a lot of things, but the two things that remained with me was that if somebody loses $1,000, so you feel pain. Someone gains $1,000, you feel joy. Do they cancel each other out? The answer is no. You need to make $3,000 to have enough joy to cancel out the pain of losing $1,000, because we have a sense of entitlement. You feel more pain when you lose than the joy you have for the same amount. So you need more. So you're basically saying that for every negative thing in your life, make sure you have 3 times as much positive, because that's the human nature. And now that's another discussion, is to study why human nature is that way, whether we're spoiled or whatever it is. The second thing he said, which was also interesting, he said, studies show, I didn't confirm this, I'm based on what I heard from him. Studies show, he said, that per capita, the country with the happiest people is Holland. Holland. And there's different theories. Nobody knows why. One theory is because Holland is more or less a socialist country, and therefore a lot of your needs are basically met, are provided. Like, for example, there's free health insurance and other stuff like that. So they think it's like a lower stress level life. But he decided to study it because he's a professor in these matters. He decided he's going to travel there. And he came up with a different theory. His theory was that in Holland, he noticed there are no billboards. Billboards are not allowed. So you have no public advertising. Billboards on the roads, on the highways. There's no billboards. And he did some studies, and he said that in the Western world, especially the United States, by the time you're age 20, listen to this, we have seen the average man or woman at age 20 has seen 1 million advertisements, whether on TV or in visual or magazines or whatever it is. It sounds right. I mean, you wouldn't think of it as a million's a lot, but it means every day you're seeing plenty, and it accumulates. And therefore, his theory was that the more you see, the more you covet, and the more you feel you're deprived of. So if you wouldn't see all this, because there's no way you're getting everything you see. You're not going on every trip, and you're not smoking every cigar, and you're not going to every movie, and not buying every food. So basically what you're seeing is like someone showing you, like a child in a candy shop. You see so many candies, and you feel deprived. If you only saw one candy all your life, you wouldn't feel deprived. So that was his theory on the happiness, which, I didn't confirm this, but it resonated as being accurate. And taking it back to what my point I want to make here is that it comes down to where does adrenaline come from? If it comes from these superficial highs, vicariously living through other visual stimulation and other things, you guaranteed, just like it is with the caffeine or the sugar, you're going to have a big low, that you're going to need a refill, a reboot. I'm sorry. Yeah, you constantly have to constantly refill yourself. Whereas if you learn to focus on what can give you adrenaline flow of in general that's coming from a natural place and driven by something really a beautiful thing, beautiful cause, or it's a whole different story. And I want to apply that to something that's close to my heart. As you may know, I lived my whole life in Crown Heights, USA. This is a little shtetl on the east coast of the United States called New York. And so I grew up there. I was born there and lived there. I grew up in the Chabad system. I went through the yeshiva system and so on. I mean, my case, just for the record, in case you're interested, the good news was that, that's also good news, but even better news was that I grew up in a home that though I had a very serious traditional education, yeshiva from morning to night, the whole intensity, and with all the pressures involved in so-called religious pressures, but I grew up in a home that was a non-dogmatic home. That was the exception in my case. Because my father, as I mentioned, was a journalist, and it was a home, my parents were well-read, and my father was well-traveled, and the ideas flowed, and there was never something off limits. There was no problem talking about skepticism or atheism or all the isms. It was an open-minded home that did not feel that you have to silence someone or not allow questions because it's threatening. So for me, it was a very healthy thing, because I don't know what would have happened to me had it not been that way. Because I had friends, and I deal with this all the time now, people who grew up in very religious homes, and they were actually, yes, suppressed and not allowed to express themselves. And many suffer greatly from that. Either they had to break away, or till this point, till this day, feel very suppressed and unrealized, unactualized. So for me, it was a very good balance, because I was able to explore and both ends of the story here. I'm saying that only because, as a result of that, I'm both like an insider and an outsider, if I could put it that way. I'm an insider because I grew up with it, and I went through the whole system, and I climbed the ranks. I became one of the as I mentioned in my first talk, one of the what was called a chayzer and a maniach, a person who memorized the hours and hours of the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's talks, and then I became a writer and the main writer of these talks from 1979 till 1992 when the Rebbe suffered a stroke. But at the same time, I really explored the world around me, and I was very much into mathematics and physics and the different philosophies, and I checked out different schools of thought, let's put it that way. And to me, it wasn't a contradiction. I was able to find my balance and so on. But I always look at Judaism and Torah, and including the world I grew up in, the Chabad world, with a certain measure of discretion, I would say. I could even say skepticism, but not in a bad way, because I chose to remain, and I chose to embrace, and I chose to be a teacher in this world, as well as the world outside. But I'm mostly really involved with secular people, to be honest. I mean secular people, I mean even more secular than anyone even coming to such a weekend. People who wouldn't even come to anything Jewish and don't associate it all with Judaism. Some people call me the rabbi of atheists and so on, because I'm very good with them, because I know the other side of the coin. I know how to speak also from the case to be made against faith, if you wish. I know the weaknesses of faith and religion and the corruption around it and so on. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I'm saying it for a reason. So when I was going through and studying and learning to go through my own journey, and I'll probably share with it in some other talks as it's relevant. So one of the things I always was very fascinated was with the Rebbe himself, because he was like the leader, a visionary, in the mold of a Moses and the mold of all the Jewish leaders. And to me, this was a tremendous important study, because when, for example, you look at people, you take a look at any society, you're going to find the whole spectrum. You're going to find people who are intelligent. You're going to find idiots. You're going to find people who are very ethical. You're going to find corrupt people. That's in any society. You're going to find a variety. And anyone mature comes to realize that, and realize you're not coming. Whenever I teach people, I say, listen, you're going to come to Kohen Heights. Don't think everybody's a tzaddik here. And that's the truth anywhere. So then when people say, okay, so why is it so special? I'll tell you why. Because the tzaddikim here are better than the tzaddikim elsewhere. But that doesn't mean there aren't people at the bottom of the pile, if you wish. That's every society. So for me, the Rebbe was, besides, of course, I respected him and loved him and cared, but I also looked at him as a model in the sense, okay, if this is the ultimate Jewish leader, like what does he stand for? What is his ideology? Besides that, do mitzvahs and Torah. I'm talking about it in a deeper way for our generation. And one of the things that I'm sure you're all aware of is this concept that the Rebbe instituted in 1950 when he became leader, called shlichus. Basically insisting and pushing and encouraging and inspiring and not forcing anyone. Do not live in Crown Heights, do not live in Kfar Chabad, do not live in Jerusalem. Move out of your communities, go anywhere and find Jews and inspire them. build educational centers, build synagogues, do whatever it takes. And everyone thinks that the main driving force was very simple. When you have such high rates of assimilation and such high rates of intermarriage, that it's obligation. You can't just sit in the yeshiva and just sit in your own little comfortable corner. There's a fire burning, a fire of ignorance, a lot of assimilation, and really mostly ignorance, because it's not due to someone intentionally. Most Jews growing up today simply don't even know what it means to be Jewish. So that's the ostensible reason. And I'm not denying that that was a big one, but there's a bigger factor here, and I would say it's a deeply psychological factor, which leads me straight to the adrenaline point I wanted to make, and that was that the Rebbe recognized something which, to me, that blew me away more than anything. In 1950, you have to remember, it's 5 years after World War II. Okay? So you have Nazis had decimated a third of our people. Many of you come from Russian descent. You know Russia was just not the same. You had a Stalin who was a nice competition to Hitler. Just did it a different way. And I don't have to tell you what the communists did to try to stamp out every remnant of faith and religion. As a matter of fact, when my book was translated into Russian, Toward a Meaningful Life, so they told me that it's very difficult to translate certain words because in Russia, words like God and faith have become toxic. You can't use those words. It will sound like a book from 60 years ago. And they had to find ways to actually translate it because the mentality was to cut out anything to invalidate and make sure it's not seen in any sophisticated way, ideas of God, faith, and religion, and so on. So the point is, so in 1950, what's the climate of the Jewish people? We're talking about Israel just became a state. It wasn't exactly yet some major force and strength and so on. The Jews psychologically were completely devastated. Everyone was a survivor one way or another. And there was almost like demoralization everywhere. There was almost I read newspaper accounts. I wasn't born yet, but I read, there was like no morsel of hope even. In 1950, most accounts said that Jews will not exist. After 1990, there will be no more Jews left. And the logic was simple, it was scientific. That on one hand, 6 out of 18 million were killed, many of them leaders, teachers, rabbis, and so on. The rest were orphans, widows, widowers, with no home, with no money, with no country. Nobody wanted them. So it's not like they came back to their towns in Poland and in Ukraine and wherever, and everybody said, great, hey, that wasn't that case at all. In America, religion was not thriving. It was being destroyed as we spoke. It was known that you came from over to the United States. If you were Shomer Shabbat, you're probably going to not be Shomer Shabbat anymore. Because here was a different world. So what was the climate? The climate was one of complete, there's no hope. So I said to myself, how does a leader deal with this in 1950? And the Rebbe's approach was completely counterintuitive. You'd think what he would do is, first, let's strengthen the people, give them a little hope. Let's build parnasa, income, build families. So obviously that goes without saying. They did whatever they could. He went on a completely different approach. He made this bold statement. We're going to go out and conquer the world with Judaism. We're going to demonstrate that we are leaders. If you think of it, if you listen to this, you'd think it's completely unrealistic. The guy is living a fantasy. The Rebbe, that is. Saying it in very blunt terms. And yet, he understood something that most did not understand. With this adrenaline thing. That the best defense is offense. You don't fight demoralization with just giving people some scraps and giving them a little hope. You need to take a completely different approach. That we are leaders, and we've been hurt, and we've been wounded, but we're not going to fall down and die. We're going to lead the way. That's what a commander-in-chief does. We may have lost a battle, but we didn't lose the war. And that's what he did. He launched a whole approach, which to me, when I look at it from a sociological point of view, far more than what benefited the assimilated world, which was even a greater benefit to the people who went out. Because had they stayed in Crown Heights, had they stayed in their Jewish communities, they may have been devout Jews and eat kosher and have a lot of good kosher restaurants, and today we have sushi and pizza and we have everything. But they would not have been leaders. They would still be these more insulated, almost like provincial. And the Rebbe wanted to make them global. And that's what he did. He took people who may have been mediocre on their own and said, you got to be leaders. I think from a point of view of leadership, it's one of the most tremendous studies. Because that's how you take people who feel downtread what's the word? Not downtrodden. What's the word? Downtrodden. And feel down. You don't just. Obviously, you do whatever it takes to make them feel better, but it took a completely different approach. And look today, in Judaism, defense will not work. Once upon a time, you could have built a new square. You build a Kiryat Joel or Monroe. You build your own ghetto. And you don't let in other influences. But today, this little phone, you cannot build ghetto walls. Everything is in your hand. So this idea of, let's say, banning the internet or banning secular influences, I'm not even saying it was ever a good idea. But even if there was an illusion that it would be a good idea, it's just not possible. It's not possible because there's no defense today against technology. Technology will pierce every wall. You can't do anything to stop that. So the only defense is offense. You fill somebody up with a life that's driven with an adrenaline toward good things, and there's less time and less energy to do other stuff. And that's what I think was a wisdom that's almost impossible to have anyone to anticipate. That's only real leaders can think like that. In 1950, let alone. I'm not talking about 1990. 1950, right after the war. And that's what I think that's why I wanted to use that as a case study. So let's apply it to ourselves. Simply comes down to this. Go back to what I said earlier. What are the things in your life that you could say are driven like offense, where you say these are the things that drive my adrenaline, and it's a sense of urgency, and in some way it's serving a cause. And as I said, it could be anything, but not about just your own self. That's why I don't, a person's, let's say, consumed with music. I don't mean to embarrass you, but here's a teacher, right here. I'm referring to you. He uses music to teach. Okay? He taught my son, and now he's teaching my grandson. And my son tells me that he's singing the same songs as he did when he was a child. Took music, his passion, and turned it into an educational tool that has shaped generations. Okay? That's an example. Now, I don't know if anyone told him to do it. I think he did it, but he grew up. He was inspired by that type of mode. You have to take your talent and use it. I hope you don't mind me using it. You just happen to be sitting here. Okay. It's perfectly fine. By the way, the 60s we can learn much about. The young people then wanted to make a difference. They wanted to change the world. What do you think? I was about to talk about the 60s, actually. So, does everybody know who you are? No. Okay. Well, he's a good example, role model. Am I right? I'm asking his wife. Okay. So I was. This was a segue. So to me, the first thing is I think to look at ourselves. I know you may have come here to hear some tips on how to get beyond exhaustion. So I could tell you to drink coffee, and maybe jog, and go on a diet. Find a new. But I'm trying to talk about it, of course, in a broader sense. Find the things, and all of you have them. Everybody here in this room has something that is unique to you. It could be creative. It can be even people-oriented. Everybody has things where you can volunteer and find something, passion. These are the things that actually can change the course of our own destinies. So I wanted to use it now, apply it. I was speaking to a group of, they call teens at risk. Teens at risk, they were like 18 to 21-year-old boys and girls who they were post-risk, to be honest. They were already in rehab. These are kids who got themselves in trouble with alcohol, drugs, and the likes, and were already getting out of it by going to rehab and so on. Jewish? So, they were Jewish. Mostly not. Some observant, some not. Some grew up in observant homes. Observance was not their issue anymore. They had gotten too far beyond that issue. So anyway, I knew a few of them, so they asked me if I would just hang out with them a bit. It wasn't formal. It was more of a 35 kids. I don't know if they call them kids anymore. They probably have more experience than a lot of people. But here's what happened. I asked them, I said, look, none of you woke up one morning and said, you know what, I want to become an addict. There's no such thing. Nobody says, I want to become an addict. Right? So how did you get yourself in a place where you ultimately were unable to control your dependencies? That you had things that controlled you. It goes against human dignity. Why would anybody want to be controlled by something? How did you get to that place? And I just wanted to go around the room and just hear their words. And they were at a place where they were already very comfortable to talk about it because they were already, as I said, on the rebound. And it was interesting that what different people said. One said, my parents were going through a very ugly divorce, and I was miserable, and I was just looking for anything, just some escape. And it was, for me, it was drugs just became a great escape. I went into my own little la la land, pot, and then some more heavier stuff. And that I found, that was my life. I was living in a cloud. I lived in to escape from all this, the yelling and screaming and the agony and all. Another person said I had bad friends. And I was invited one night. I started drinking, binge drinking, this drinking, and then one thing led to the next. Everyone had their thing. Depression. Somebody was molested. I mean, you name it. Every nightmare. Everyone had their their horror stories. Bad friends. A few people had said that friends. So you start out, and you're not planning to get addicted, and then one thing leads to the next, and this becomes now your life. You become dependent on it. And but then I said to them, but I know, you probably all know friends that had also went through the difficult divorce, parents, and other things, and didn't become. Why not? Why is one different than the other? Why did you turn this way and others don't? That's the question. Anyway, after a longer back and forth, one thing emerged. Somebody mentioned, I forgot, one of the kids just simply said, boredom. I was tremendously bored. I'm a very creative person, and I had no outlets. And someone said to me, if you try this, I think it was LSD, you'll open up some new creative channels, and you'll be able to. It'll just get you. It'll catapult you into a new way of looking at things. So I did it, and it was very powerful, and that was that. So the boredom thing, that's what I wanted to talk to them about. So I said, so now if you have these different traumas that you all described, and you add boredom into the picture, so boredom doesn't sound very threatening. What's boredom? So you're bored. Everybody's bored a bit. But boredom is a vacuum. And nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the human psyche. A vacuum is an empty place. What happens when there's a vacuum? Things start crawling in there. And vacuums also scientifically create tremendous amount of energy because they're very empty and they're very powerful. And that's why you don't want to have vacuums. God forbid, air bubbles, let's say in the veins, is not exactly good. So you want to have no vacuums. And I said, so that's the key thing. If you're able to see a young man or woman, and they've got energy, and the energy is not going anywhere, you rest assured you got yourself a ticking time bomb here. Now, God should bless them and protect them, and nothing should happen. But energy does not sit quietly. It's going to bubble, and it's going to burst. So if you see a kid that's good at a writer, creative, scientific-minded, music, art, the worst possible thing is to let them get bored. Or tell them, no, you're not allowed to read books because who knows what you're going to read. Or you can't play music. It's the worst possible thing because you're taking somebody who's got energy and telling them you can't use the energy. Where do you think it's going to go? It's going to implode, and it has to give somewhere. So we talked about this at length. I said, so all of you, I think at this point, if you ask me to contribute to anything you're doing, you're doing well, rehab. Take those talents you have and do something with it. Change the world. Create a revolution. Do something big. Do something small. It doesn't matter. And I think it's one of the ways, because that's going back to the journal. Those outlets create a force that deals with the mediocrity, the boredom. What Thoreau writes, that most men lead lives of quiet desperation. Quiet desperation. The emphasis on the word quiet. It's quiet. So it doesn't sound loud, but quiet desperation is much worse than loud desperation. Because loud desperation is going to let you know. Quiet desperation is like a sleeping giant. It sleeps and brews, exactly. It brews and percolates slowly, and then, and that's what you don't want to have. And that's invisible. You don't see it. You see a young person, they're not going to tell you because they themselves might not be aware. And I think even for us, the same thing. We have plenty of such energy. Now, we may have learned to either shut it off and just say, gave up, like resignation. What do they say? I'm too young to know. I'm sorry, I'm too young to know, and I'm too old to find out. That's what some people say. Can you imagine? So what are you stuck with? Resignation, and just like someone tells me, I'm happy at the end of the day. I used to have all kinds of dreams. Now I'm happy if I come home and I wasn't hurt. Zero game. What do they call zero sum? A zero sum. If I leave home in the morning, come back without anything being. I said, that's very interesting. That's not very profitable, But he says, yeah, but at this point in life, if I didn't get beat up that day, I'm already celebrating. So we lower our standards. And what I'm trying to say is that we don't have to, because that spark is there. I can tell you another thing about the Rebbe. The sparkle in the eye at 92 was just like when he was 42. Now, I didn't know him at 42, but I could see it. And you see because he had that driving force. Okay, so he's a leader of a unique, but he taught others to be such leaders. You don't have to be the biggest tzaddik in the world. It means because you have tremendous energy inside of you. Right now, bottled up. And I would even venture to stay a step further. That exhaustion is sometimes inverted energy. So you get so exhausted because you have so much energy to hold back. It's like someone has holding a secret. You have to put more energy to hold the secret back. So what happens is you get exhausted. So it's so ironic. The energy that's supposed to give you so much power suddenly becomes a force that you need to hold back. And you'll hear this a lot from people who are in recovery. They say the secrets that I had to carry as a child, the abuse I endured, and it was all quiet. The energy that exerts on you is unbelievable. Because you live with so much guilt and pain. And that's why breaking the silence is so vital in any healing, because it's like a bottled up story. It's like a kettle that is so heated up and there's no spout. So what do you think happens? It's like people will say, I haven't cried in 30 years, because if I start crying, I don't know if I'll be able to stop. What happens? So all this implodes, and it creates this knotted up place. That's very exhausting. Those knots inside of you. That's why sometimes even physical exercise, don't underestimate that. Physical exercise, sports, and other things can actually be tremendous. Even though you think, well, I'm exhausted, how am I going to go run now? It's actually running will make you less exhausted because it frees that energy. And that is basically an offense that is better than defense. And we don't have to, we live a lot of defense because we don't have a lot of people we trust. We live in a world dog eats dog, and there's a lot of insecurity, frankly, and fear. And these fears and insecurities take a lot of energy because it's constant energy figuring out how to maneuver. Just imagine going out of home, you're going to work, and you have to maneuver. You have to negotiate. You have a boss that's this way, and you have a coworker that way. How much energy are you expending in maneuvering and trying to figure out? Even though you'll say it comes natural and easy to you, but because you're doing it so long, that doesn't mean it doesn't take energy. It's taking a lot of energy. So all this is basically living a life on defense, protecting yourself, as opposed to, okay, so what are you giving? And that approach, that you go out there and you be a giver, you're an influencer, is a tremendous way of building energy and building adrenaline and building what I would call all the chemicals you need that preempt a lot of the problems in life. So that's my take on this whole exhaustion and energy thing. And I hope you can use it in your own life. And I'll take some questions here. Let me just finish with a little blessing. So as I look at all of you, I remind myself of Michelangelo's statement, where when he was asked, how do you sculpt those beautiful angels in the marble? And you know what he answered? He said, I see the angels trapped in the marble, and I carved and set them free. So it's not, you all have the angel within you. You all have the flower, the energy within you. But it's sometimes trapped in marble and concrete, in other substances that we don't have to mention. And it's not a matter of going to find it, it's a matter of carving away the excess, and you see the angel come forth. That's the challenge that we all have. But it makes it a lot easier because you know it's inside of you. So you need people that support. Look at your Rolodex. I don't know if they call it Rolodex anymore. Look at your contact list, contact management, whatever, CRM. And look, I'm sure you have people, if you call them on the phone and you're excited and enthusiastic about something, they'll be the first ones to throw cold water and say, we've heard your dreams. Stop fantasizing. If you have such people in your life, you must add new friends in your life. Then when you call them, you feel a vote of confidence. I believe in you. Go for it. Don't underestimate those. You need those voices. We have too many, misery loves company and failure loves failure. People who have lost their dreams, unfortunately, love to hear how others have lost their dreams because it makes them feel better. So you have to find people who are believing you and believe in themselves. When a war is being fought and let's say a battle is lost, or you're retreating because the enemy is attacking. So think about it. Many soldiers, what would they do? Retreat. Okay, we give up. You need a commander-in-chief that says, no, we're not giving up. We can't go this way, we're going to go this way. We can't go this way, we'll go that way. You have to have people in your life that have that type of forward thinking. And finally, I'll say what my father used to tell me as a journalist. He used to say there are three types of people. People who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and people who ask what happened. So you can imagine, we should all be of the first sort. Thank you. Sure, you have a few questions here. Let's take them. Go ahead.
So,
What?
I haven't started yet. So my question is...
I'll repeat it if it's not loud enough. Okay.
My question is, this wonderful gift that you have of memorizing things, do you have any lectures on teaching this thing? I would love to acquire it.
That's an excellent question. The question is about the... As a matter of fact, I was surprised they didn't put it on one of these talks, because I do give a few talks on it. I'm actually I'm thinking of writing a book, Secrets of the Mind that I learned from memory, from the years of memory, because it's more than memory. It's more about listening.
It's about focus.
Yeah. So if you now we did this session. I'm looking at what the next topics are. Maybe I'll work it into one of them. Let me see. You think so?
Oh, are you kidding?
You think they won't fire me? Okay. If you don't tell them, I won't tell them. No, I know that, by the way.
It's very much about focus because I focus...
No, I have no problem just winging on any topic, but I want to stay focused. Hold on. Why it is good that life is a struggle? I don't know. You know what? If you guys want this topic talking about?
Yes.
Oh yeah, it's a very interesting stuff. Okay, I'll definitely give one of them. I'm not sure yet when. Just let's see which one works. Fine, I'll work it in. Good. That'll be my...
Thank you.
Okay. It's a very good question.
See, I focused on that and I put it in
What?
my head, in the back of my head, and said I want to...
Why these probe lights? I don't know why.
He said because it's supposed to increase memory.
The strobe lights? I think that they're confusing it with maybe the concert they want to have tomorrow night or something. I don't know.
They must have a reason for it.
Why are there strobe lights? It's a good question. My first session didn't have it. Maybe the guy was here between. Okay, you want to have...
That could be.
Okay, let's take some other guy.
I don't know if it's a very like low level way to think of it, but the Rebbe didn't sleep many hours. You said you had a twinkle in the eye. Is it when you're in touch with your soul so much and you're in touch with your mission to that degree? Would you equate it? Would you correlate it to that?
Absolutely, it's a great question. As a matter of fact, I'll give you a thought on this. The Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe, slept very little as well. I'm sure they all did. And someone once asked him, how do you do that? So they say, I do everything fast. I grasp ideas quickly, I know how to process quickly, so I also sleep quickly. So what's that? So I used to think, okay, nice little cute line. But then, if you study sleep, REM, exactly. REM is only a few minutes. Usually early morning, like 4 or 5. But REM is the rapid eye movement state, where you dream usually. It's like the most. It's a point where they identify as the biggest recharge happens. It's like so. Why can't we just go to REM? Because there's no way you can take a plane can't just go off in one shot. You need to taxi. So the sleep before and the sleep after is meant to contain the REM, because the REM is too intense. The REM would be like someone plugs in a thing that shocks you to. But I was thinking that maybe that's what he meant, that for people who can do it quickly, they need less taxi time and less landing time. So they can go to a REM state quicker, and I think it's very scientific. There's no question, a person driven in life, I have no doubt, just like with the opera singer thing I said, I am sure can also... listen, it's not a magic that's going to stop you from dying, or is going to stop you from, God forbid, other things. A person can get into an accident. But I think it probably can preempt a lot of illnesses. Because when you have that drive, it just gives you that superhuman power. So you don't let, most people, the common cold, we almost give into. As a matter of fact, I was going to write a book about it. It was more of a comedy. That the common cold is what saved civilization. Because it's the great excuse. You know what? I'm down. I'm under the weather. I'm over the weather. I'm almost under the weather. It's like, this every few months you could always say, why am I not being that productive? I got a cold. It's like that. Good excuse for everything. But I think people who are really, really driven don't give in to any of that stuff. I can't say it's for everybody, but I'm no doubt that that's the case. Basically a high octane for good purposes, good causes. I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the spurts that are like more like you see addicts do this. There are people who are on drugs that can go for hours, but I'm not, or frankly even things like bipolar when you're in a manic state. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about it in a healthy way where you channel it and it's expressed in some productive fashion. There's no question about it. Try it out. You find something like that and you commit it, have no question it improves your quality of life. It has to. It's similar to, just to use an example, like, you see patients in the hospital and when they have visitors or don't have visitors.
Oh, yeah.
People without visitors, they give in because there's no one there to support them and they become demoralized, and demoralized state gives into the illness. You see people who have family rooting for them and giving them family and gifts and so on. It has to have, optimism has to have a psychosomatic effect. Whether it's on the adrenaline or other chemicals, it has to. There's no question about it because it just makes your mood, and when your mood is stronger, you're going to fight more. It's like knowing that there are people with you, so you're going to fight. And there's no one with you, you're going to give up. In Tanya, he says something like that in chapter 26, like the battle. That when you feel confident, you can wrestle better. When you don't, it's similar in sports. You could have a Roger Federer or somebody get into a funk, same talent, but they just they either had an injury or Nadal. Okay, fine, yeah. No, I'm saying, but they could have an injury, or they can suddenly lose to someone, and then they suddenly the same talent, but they don't have the confidence, and they second guess, and they thinking when they serve. And a good coach, what does a good coach do? Can't give them talent. He kicks them in the butt, basically. And you keep having opponents, and you have to build the confidence back. Confidence is as equally important. Confidence and experience.
The skill level of the top 100 is like negligible. It's all mindset, 6'5", like one serve.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all mindset.
Absolutely. And same thing in the human condition, 100%. The confident ones, and again, I'm not talking about false confidence. We're talking about real confidence. Probably, if you had to say confidence here and competence, confidence is more than competence. Because competence without confidence.
Very interesting.
Now you need competence too, but I'm not. But I'm saying as far as
Actually, I've come to a conclusion that confidence or lack of drives every decision that we make in our lives.
okay, I would accept that. Fear. It's like fear as well. How many of us fear? We admit it or not. How much is fear playing a factor in decisions you make? And I'm not saying fear of even unknown. It could be an imagined fear, fear even of success, fear of what will happen, unknowns.
70-80% probably, right?
Look, I listen. Fear of success, by the way, is a tremendous. You're saying it's working. Why should I try more? Maybe I'll fail. So why as well not?
But a lot of ignorant people are very confident.
Confident?
Yes, a lot of ignorant and rude and
That's true.
they're very confident
talking about
and
Are they confident or they're arrogant?
that's what I'm saying. They're being arrogant, they're confident that they are whatever.
No. But you see, arrogance is false confidence. It's not real
I
confidence.
know, but there are a lot of people like that everywhere, and it's very hard to, if you...
Are they successful? Let me ask you.
Yeah, sometimes first of all, they cover, if they fail, they cover their failure. They
Okay.
don't admit it, but they are...
No, they're a pain in the butt. We know that.
And they're obnoxious and
Exactly.
confident and ignorant, and it's, I don't know how to deal with these people. I back up and because I don't have...
But that's a different subject completely. It's not what I'm talking about. The confidence I'm talking about is a healthy confidence, a humble confidence. I'm talking about real success, not fake. You're talking about people who are narcissists and arrogant. Like the one guy tells me about somebody, he hides his ignorance with his arrogance. Now, they can cover up all they want. I'm talking about actually how to be successful, really, not fake.
But if you are having a project with one of those people who are...
I would never work with such a person. Because as you said, they'll cover up. on their mistakes.
But
They'll never be honest.
How?
One second. Listen, your question is legitimate. It's just not the context of our conversation.
I have a question.
No. I'll answer you, but I just want to make sure it's not what we're talking about. Well, you're saying, if you are a person like that, let's say, people ask, should I work together with my spouse, be a partner? Most cases, it's not such a wise thing. And one of the reasons is, especially if the spouse is like you're describing, so you don't want to be in a person in that type of position. If you have no choice but to work with someone who's like you're describing, maybe you just do the minimum and not invest too much in it, because you're not going to get too far. People that you're describing are impossible at the end of the day, because they will never admit a mistake. They will always blame somebody else. And to them, it's all about them more than about the success. So if you have no choice, you have someone like that in your life, so, that needs its own...
Minimum, right?
I would stick to the minimum.
I'd rather work with a guy
But I would need to hear more details. You're talking, it's still too vague for me to understand, because I would like to know, why does one have to be there, Usually you have to be there because either a family member or it's because of a business you're in, and you're stuck in a place. Yeah, but that's why maybe you have the person buy you out,
I have a question. Thank you.
In order to get to that state of adrenaline, is it necessary to push your zone of comfort and to take risks and to
Oh, yeah.
and to push yourself? In other words, there are a lot of things you can do to influence the world that are still in your realm of your competence and of your zone of comfort. But to get to what you're talking about, you have to actually take risk and push yourself
Yes,
outside of that zone.
I agree. And also maybe hook up with other people in a project or something, so it's not just yourself. Sometimes it's hard to do yourself. But yeah, usually you have to push yourself. But you're pushing yourself for something you believe in, something that's good. We're not talking about some type of slave labor. We're talking about something that you enjoy and that can actually benefit. I mean, people underestimate their power, but especially if you're a parent of children and children are home still, there's so many creative things you can do with your children. And children have natural creativity that unfortunately many of the school systems knock out of them and undermine. So getting children's creative energy going is a tremendous way of getting your own energy going.
And TVs destroy that creative energy.
Any vicarious, escape. Now, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, videos have become the best babysitter. Like when my grandchildren come to my house, my grandson needs to watch football games that he already knows the outcome 10 times, but he needs to watch it, I don't get involved in that. The parents make the decisions, but I see it. So, how destructive it will be in the long term as this generation, my grandchildren's age, for them, this is so intuitive. They use it better than we do. They just know how to roll, blah, blah, blah. It's a fascinating how Apple came up with these ways of even little children so intuitive. But then you think, what kind of generation is going to grow up? So the only thing I would respond to that would be, you have to feed your children with a lot of real natural relationships. Shabbos is a tremendous day for this purpose. You shut everything down and you learn to communicate. And you tell your children not to wait and they're miserable till Shabbos ends. No, we're going to learn to talk eye to eye and sing together and speak together and tell a story and share and be humans. And as much as you can do that throughout the week. I don't really see it being able to eliminate the technology, because even if you get rid of it in your own house, for young age, let's say, they go to a friend. What are you going to do then? Not let them go to friends? It's like at this point it's like part of the culture. And but everything has an offense that you can, like if you could teach our children, okay, use the phone, use the email, use the social media, but you have to send out at least 3 good messages to friends every day, like I said earlier. Heartwarming, inspiring messages. So then they learn, okay, they can use it, but they have to do something good for mankind. I think that's a good way, because then you infuse in them the concept that this is meant to be used as a tool for good, not just a tool for playing games. We have our challenges. I would love to hear. There's a lot to talk on that topic.